Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on this 23rd of August. Thanks for joining us tonight for Alaska weather. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. You can find that on the Alaska Weather Information line at 1-800-472-0391. Find us online at weather.gov/Alaska. And if you haven't tried it lately, head to mobile.weather.gov. mobile.weather.gov is a small website that will act like an app. The Weather Service doesn't have an app, but it has a web page that acts like one. And if you dial that up, punch in your location there at the top, and then save that to your home screen on your mobile device, it'll work just the same. It'll be reliable and low bandwidth options for you there. If you have a low or poor signal, it should work pretty good. Here is a look at the rest of the information here. Weather.gov/Alaska, of course, is our big website. If you can't find what you're looking for there, please let me know, and I'm happy to help you find the right tools that we have all around Alaska to make your job easier and certainly safer no matter where you are. As we look at the hazardous weather for tonight, we have a flood advisory coming off the Snow Glacial Dam Lake that's going to head into the Kenai Lake area over the weekend. We're watching those river levels very carefully there as the lake, the glacial dam has released just in the last couple days, so water levels will probably start to come up in places where you are as we head through the weekend, and we'll be keeping close watch on that. But for right now, flood advisories are posted for that because of the release, and we have a smoke advisory for the western Kenai Peninsula that will continue for tonight and into early tomorrow morning. Of course, as we all know in South Central, air quality is rather poor, and especially on the Kenai Peninsula tonight and early tomorrow. Here's a quick look of the Snow Glacial Dam Lake. If you're not familiar with where we're talking about, this is the Snow Glacier. And Seward would be right about here. And here is the river gauge that we'll be watching as the levels are starting to come up there. This is the Snow River, and that feeds into the upper Kenai Lake there. And so we'll be keeping close watch, or Ski Lac Lake, I guess, as we are keeping close watch on that over the weekend and watching to see if there's going to be any impacts or changes for that could affect your travel, your camping, anything like that. So make sure you head to weather.gov/Alaska for the latest flood warnings. If there are any issues, you'll see it there, and certainly on your weather radio too. Fire danger in the meantime, watching around the Copper River Valley, down through the Kenai Peninsula and up to the Susitna Valley, and also across southwestern Alaska, where we're seeing fire weather indices still rated pretty high. That's at least the orange level. And then when we get into the extreme level, that's where you start to see the red. And we have that creeping back into the Copper River Valley now. We certainly have that around Anchorage area into the Palmer region and up into the Susitna Valley. Of course, these are all places where you can see on your local fire departments or Forest Services board there with Smokey the Bear pointing to extreme. This is bad. This is fire danger is very high, and it won't take much, if anything, to get a fire going. The good news is that the weather right now is not something that is going to make it a whole lot worse. So this is more to do with the dry grasses and dry brush that's in place right now. We're not expecting the weather to make it worse as we did last weekend when things really were blowing around and the fire danger got out of control just because of the wind. We're not seeing that right now, so that is good news. Let's take a look at the drought monitor. We were talking about this yesterday. You can see no big changes for southeast. We're still looking at severe drought to extreme drought across some of the southern parts of the Panhandle, with at least moderate to severe across the northern Panhandle. This is long-term, but short-term drought there across south central and southwestern Alaska, at least abnormally dry to moderate. That's D0 to D1. If you're a drought monitor fan there, you can type in drought monitor to your Google search engine or wherever you like to go, and you'll find this. This is from the University of Nebraska, Lincoln. And the red areas there are extreme drought, and that covers Palmer and into Anchorage and northern parts of the Kenai Peninsula there. And where that doesn't cover it, we are certainly into the severe drought, that brighter orange color for all the Kenai Peninsula and most of the Susitna Borough. It's dry out there. That, again, is feeding that wildfire danger. Here's a look at what's coming our way. As we look at the satellite picture, what has been for Friday, you can see one weather disturbance kind of stretching out right here and falling apart. There's one. We also have a gale across the central and eastern Gulf that is slinging moisture into southeastern Alaska. Small craft advisories now on the inside passages for southeast, but really not a whole lot to write home about. As this first disturbance swings in, that's caused a little bit of light rain across the central and eastern interior. On the infrared satellite picture, you can see another disturbance lining up across Wrangell Island, pushing south and east into the interior. And as it does that, you can see that's probably going to fall apart too. But it has brought some higher surf conditions to parts of the Chukchi coast. You can see a lot of cloud cover here north of the Brooks Range. That's going to keep conditions low for a large part of the weekend. And we've also got fairly stable air here across the west with high pressure in command. That's sitting out in the west at 1,024 millibars, helping to draw in that northerly flow. Areas of light rain here across the north slope, not snow reported by the sensors this afternoon. We do expect to see some light snow chances continuing across the Brooks Range again, mainly above about 2,000 to 4,000 feet, and mainly only a couple inches of snow. Arctic Village got their first round just yesterday, I believe. As that front drops southward, we're going to continue to see a northerly drier flow for most of south central. Smoke will continue to be a problem in the area, and low pressure across the eastern Gulf sits at 988 millibars. That's a gale, but it is working that front inland, and the wind should gradually subside as we go through the weekend. That system's already falling apart with weak areas of low pressure back behind it around 1,002 to 1,008 millibars around the Bristol Bay region. Showers are possible there for some of the higher terrain in Bristol Bay and certainly into the Alaska Range, but we don't expect a lot of precipitation across south central where we really need it. Cooler high pressures moving into the northern parts of the Yukon, 1,011 millibars there, and already this frontal boundary is falling apart. As a stationary boundary, it's not much to write home about. A little bit of a warmer air is moving into the Chukchi coast, and that is all rotating around that big high pressure system behind me. As that drops in, it will mix in with cooler air. We'll call it an occluded front. It's already falling apart. The main effects of that will be an onshore flow from the west and northwest and some low clouds, rain, and drizzle. Smoke continues down in south central, some light rain showers in southwest, and rain showers on the tail end of this last weather disturbance that's passing through today. Up north, another push of cooler air comes in behind the most recent disturbance. We'll get a little bit of a chance for some mixed precipitation along the coast, mostly over the water. Areas of rain and drizzle around the Brooks Range there, out across the west coast, some pockets of wet weather, gloom more than rain, and high pressure sitting across the central chain meanders eastward just a bit at 1,029 millibars. Smoke for south central, and light rain is back in for southeast with another disturbance trying to get its act together across Kodiak Island. A quick check of your temperatures as we go through Saturday morning. 40s and 50s for southeast, south central, mid to upper 40s for you, 54 in Kodiak. Bristol Bay cools off into the mid 40s as well. Macoriac about 48, Nome 42, 41 at Utqiagvik, and temperatures in the 20s and 30s for the Brooks Range around AKwx Pass and Arctic Village there. The coastal area is a little bit milder. 50s and 60s for most of the interior and southwest. South central could make it back into the mid to upper 60s, even pushing 70 around Talkeetna tomorrow. Looks like mid 50s to about 60 degrees for many in southeast. St. Lawrence Island, 52 degrees, St. Paul, 54. Overnight lows on Sunday morning, around freezing for the Brooks Range, a little bit milder for the north coast. About 40 for Fairbanks, about 50 for Kenai, and low to mid 50s for southeast, and the west mid 40s for you. High temperatures on Sunday warming up for south central and southwest.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And on to aviation now. IFR concerns will be a little more limited across the north slope as we get into your Saturday morning. Notice how we still have a pretty wide swath from Utqiagvik eastward Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse, and then more of an inland area just north of the Brooks Range out toward Point Hope and Point Lay, and then into the outer sections of Kotzebue Sound, inside around Kotzebue itself, and even really out toward Shishmaref. VFR to MVFR transitions will happen a lot further west as we get into Saturday morning. IFR lingers across St. Lawrence Island as well as St. Matthew. MVFR concerns for St. Paul and St. George, and then IFR for most of the Aleutian chain. Hit and miss across the peninsula there. IFR fairly widespread across the Gulf, across Chilkoot and White Pass in the morning, and likely across southern extent of Clarence Strait and around Hyder for the morning there, and it looks like smoke concerns will continue as we go through the weekend. Not a whole lot of change really across the interior as we get through your Saturday afternoon. Generally, VFR conditions are expected around the Yukon and Kuskokwim valleys into Bristol Bay. Up north, it looks like Adigan and AKwx Pass will generally lean on the MVFR side of things as we get into the afternoon. IFR slides east toward Kaktovik, but pulls away from a large part of the North Slope coastline. And then just west of Kotzebue, it looks like we start to pick up some IFR concerns there, but right along the coastline as you head into the Chukchi, IFR pushes back into the central bearing, including St. Paul and St. George. Again, not a whole lot of change for Sunday morning. IFR concerns will probably be the most noticeable across some of the higher terrain of southeast and the boundary range all the way up into the Lynn Canal and Chilkoot and White Pass, as well as the capital city should experience lower conditions as we get into Sunday. IFR still lingers out across the Gulf. Marginal conditions across the outer coast and just outside of Prince William Sound. Most of the interior, again, will be looking at VFR sailing as we get into Sunday morning, with IFR concerns also pushing southward toward Wainwright, Utqiagvik, and east toward Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse as we get into your afternoon. And once again, we'll see that improved to marginal conditions, but IFR will linger in the region as another disturbance pushes south there. You'll see that upslope turn into IFR and lowered ceiling and vis there. IFR continues for a large part of the Bering. Smoke still lingers across the Kenai, and marginal conditions push into the Bering and areas surrounding Kodiak Island, including Shelikof Strait, and hit and miss across parts of southeast for your afternoon. Here's your pass conditions. As I was saying, Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass are expected to lean over toward marginal weather as we get into your Saturday afternoon there. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, and really all the way around the Horn for the Alaska Range, rainy, windy, and it looks like Isabel Pass and even Mentasta Pass probably set up as VFR and stay there through most of your Saturday and really most of Sunday, it looks like as well. Smoke, of course, will be a concern. Tonita Pass, VFR is expected throughout the day. Portage looks pretty good. Chilkoot and White Pass start at IFR, but some improvements are expected for Saturday. It'll go down again as we get into Sunday morning. Your freezing levels show that cool pool of air dropping southward across the eastern Brooks Range. This is what brought us some snow. Another round of that is passing through as we get into tomorrow morning. You can see the southern extent of this wave is already working its way into the Alaska Range, but right behind that, warm air builds in again and again across the western chain. So still plenty of warmth out there. We're just not talking about a 16,000-foot freezing level on the chart for this Saturday morning. As you look at southeast, levels around Sitka and just south are above 8,000 feet, a little bit below it as you head north. But generally speaking, most of the 49th state is above the freezing point at this point. And then icing potential is still high up there. It is coming down a little bit, and there is some moisture with that next wave traveling through. It looks like the main threat for icing, at least some isolated moderate, will be generally above 9,000 feet north of the Yukon Valley, along the Brooks Range and Kotzebue Sound across parts of the North Slope. There's another bubble of moisture here that is cool, but you're going to have to climb up probably above 10,000 feet to run into any issues with that. That'll be around St. Paul, St. George, and just to the south. Here's our jet stream now. Low pressure is set up across the southern Bering, and its main quarter of faster winds moving through the western Bering at about 50 to 65 knots, joining up with a Pacific jet that is still well to our south. And this is why we keep missing out on storms. They're all going to the Pacific Northwest because they're riding this conveyor belt of moisture and storm activity. We do have the Arctic jet trying to push in. That's just clipping the Beaufort Seacoast and north and eastern parts of Alaska at this point. At 9,000 feet, you can see that west and northwesterly flow, typically about 10 knots or so at this level, 20 knots coming into southeastern Alaska, 20 knots coming into the Chukchi Coast, but then slowing down. Low pressure sitting across the southern Bering. Most of the winds across the chain are pretty slow, 5 to 15 knots there, and similar conditions extend down to 3,000 feet, again, a north and westerly flow for most of the interior. So turbulence concerns are few. We'll focus on the north slope, generally below 4,000 feet for some isolated moderate chop throughout your Saturday.
Dual polarization technology is a major upgrade to the current radar system. It allows forecasters a better idea of what's actually out there and can help keep you safe.
Current radar technology transmits and receives information in the horizontal direction, which is very limited. Dual polarization technology, in addition to the horizontal, transmits and receives vertical energy, which allows forecasters to get information about the size, shape, and phase of the precipitation. We can use that information to better determine the precipitation type to expect at your given location.
There you have it. This new technology is currently being installed in radars across the country and is already being used by National Weather Service forecasters to produce better, more accurate forecasts. Learn more here and follow us. Want to know about the future of weather radar? Well, the National Severe Storms Lab has it here with its new phased array radar. Let's check it out.
It's a non-moving radar. It has 4 faces of the antenna, each pointing in different directions. One of the big advantages is that we're seeing so far, it can sample the area around the radar in less than a minute, maybe even a half a minute. And this is 5-6 times faster than what they can do today.
NSSL is leading the development of future weather radar with this project. Learn more here and follow us. The Storm Prediction Center is one of the NOAA weather partners. They are located in the National Weather Center in Norman, Oklahoma. Greg Carbon gives us a glimpse into what the SPC does.
Our mission is to analyze and forecast severe thunderstorms and the potential for tornadoes, large hail, and damaging winds from those thunderstorms across the lower 48 states, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. One of the primary missions of the Storm Prediction Center is the issuance of severe thunderstorm and tornado watches across the country when conditions appear to be coming together to support the development of severe thunderstorms and tornadoes.
The world-class meteorologists in the Storm Prediction Center specialize in severe weather and keeping you safe. Learn more here and follow us.
The National Severe Storms Lab is working on increasing the lead time for severe weather warnings. The national average for tornado warnings is currently 13 minutes, but more notice would be helpful, especially for those in charge of moving large groups to shelter. Warn on Forecast will help forecasters issue hazardous weather warnings earlier. The project will give them more info about the chances of strong winds, large hail, and even tornadoes.
Currently, warnings are created by forecasters looking at the atmosphere outside, understanding its volatility, and then comparing that to how they see the Doppler radar presenting what's going on inside thunderstorms. Warn on Forecast is an idea where we're going to take the massive amounts of satellite, radar, and surface data and stick them all into a very high resolution prediction model. And then by producing new forecasts every 15 or 20 minutes, the forecasters hopefully will be able to use that model to produce warnings that extend out to an hour.
Before the National Weather Service can use this tool, it must be developed and tested. One big challenge will be deciding how to get the model predictions to the forecasters.
I'm going to keep this one very low. I'm just adjusting the track.
These hazardous weather prediction models are going to produce a huge amount of output. And this fire hose of data is just too much for forecasters to handle in real time quickly. So in order to help deal with that, NSSL has developed a related project called Facets. And Facets is the methodology which will enable forecasters to focus very quickly on the most important threats.
Once Warn on Forecast and Facets are proven to be reliable and effective, then forecasters will be better able to inform you of threats nearby. Learn more here and follow us.
The Hazardous Weather Testbed is located at the National Weather Center in Norman, Oklahoma. It is used for experiments that will allow forecasters to learn and apply new technologies.
The Hazardous Weather Testbed is a really unique space throughout all of NOAA. And this is where the researchers and the operational folks come together in a common space to solve operational problems and to test new research tools that the research community is working on. The goal is to accelerate the transfer from research to operations of the newest tools and techniques.
People come from around the world to collaborate on this unique project.
And we can bring together not only NOAA people, but also university people, faculty, researchers, private sector meteorologists, folks working in other countries in meteorology, forecasters can all come together and focus on what the problem of the day is with the forecasters.
Each spring, several experiments occur in the Hazardous Weather Testbed. Learn more here and follow us.
What are you looking at? And what are you ignoring? Did you notice the NOAA logo in the corner? Forecasters have a lot of information in front of them too. Every second counts during severe weather, and decisions about where to focus are constantly being made. This could be even more challenging in the future. Phased array radar will produce 4 to 6 times more information than what we have now, which brings us to the question researchers are hoping to answer. Will more radar information affect forecasters' decisions?
From our past experiments, we've learned a lot about how forecasters think during the warning decision process, but we've also learned that those thought processes are very complex, and for that reason, we need a better way to be able to track forecasters' cognitive activity.
Inbounds and possibly golf ball sized hail.
An eye tracker is a piece of technology that is used to determine in real time where someone's eye gaze is located. And these eye trackers are typically video-based, which means a camera sits below a computer monitor, and with infrared light and vector analysis, we can determine where a person is looking and how their eyes are moving.
Eye tracking is already being used in the medical field and air traffic control. Using similar research methods, NSSL is discovering the benefit for weather forecasting too. Phased array radar will give forecasters a lot more to think about. Understanding their decision-making process will help researchers develop even more user-friendly tools. So what's the benefit for you? Even better weather warnings. To learn more, check us out online and follow us on Facebook and Twitter.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And back with a look at your Alaska sea ice analysis. Up across the north, really no change. A lot of open water here across the Beaufort and the Chukchi Sea. No change from yesterday or previous days. For the very latest information from weather.gov/Anchorage/ice, your Alaska Sea Ice program has seasonal outlooks. It'll tell you a little bit more about what to expect for fall. What we can say, though, is that the ice pack is certainly hundreds of nautical miles away from the North Alaska coastline. As we look at southeast now, gentle winds coming in from the south, about 15 knots or so. That's enough for small craft advisories across some parts of the inside passage. An onshore push coming in from the west with a low pressure system slowly falling apart and diminishing across the eastern Gulf as that moves ashore with the trough. We'll see the winds come in a little bit more from the west on your Saturday, up to 25 knots outside of the Dixon entrance. Talking about 9 to about 12-foot seas there across the outer coast, and 10 knots from the east as you move up toward Prince William Sound there with 8-foot seas in the northern Gulf. For Sunday, winds come down a little bit more. Southerlies and southwesterlies around 10 knots with 5 to 7-foot seas across the outside, and a south and easterly flow coming up the inside passage there, 15 to 20 knots with 3 to 4-foot seas on your Sunday. On Saturday for south central, northerlies across Prince William Sound, a west and southwesterly flow across the northern Gulf. Westerlies for the Barrens, 20 to 25, 5 to 6-foot seas there, and light northerlies coming down through Cook Inlet. 3-foot seas there, it looks like, over Cook Inlet. You'll see that reverse on Sunday with a south and westerly flow coming up Cook Inlet with 4-foot seas for many areas there just south of Kenai down toward Homer. A light easterly flow inside of Prince William Sound, 2-foot seas there, 4-foot seas on the outside with a southeasterly wind. Again, on the backside of that diminishing area of low pressure in the eastern Gulf. For Bristol Bay, northwesterlies at 10 knots, 2-foot seas there. 4-foot seas as you head down the Bering Sea coast, south and westerlies coming up from the north and western Gulf. A little bit of a stronger wind coming through Shelikof Strait, 20 knots and 4-foot seas there. Westerlies east of Kodiak Island with a 6-foot sea on Saturday. Most areas see a diminishing wind on Sunday. Still looking at a west and gentle northwesterly flow for parts of Bristol Bay, 15 knots and 3-foot seas for you. More of a 10-knot gentle breeze for Shelikof Strait and areas around Kodiak Island down towards Sand Point. Picks up just a bit, 15 knots and 5-foot seas for you on Sunday. Remember, high pressure still in control of the Aleutians. Parked out here across the west, it's gradually drifting eastward as we go through your weekend, but that still produces a very light wind, 10 to 15 knots tops, 3 to 4-foot seas, 4 to 5-foot seas across the Pacific coast, and we will see some low clouds and certainly some poor visibility at times because of that trapped moisture under the high. You can see the effects of that high moving eastward ever so slightly toward Adak and Atka by Sunday. A return flow from the south across Kiska and Shemya, a north and westerly flow for the central and eastern chain. Still mostly 10 to 15 knots in all areas. 3 to 4-foot seas should do the trick for the entire weekend. One exception, the wind comes up just a little bit there south of Unalaska and Nikolsky, 20 knots with 5-foot seas on your Sunday. For the west coast, around 15 knots will do it there. A little bit of a westerly push again on the northern edge of that high pressure system. You can see around Gamble and Savunga, we've got that north and westerly wind. Northerlies inside of Norton Sound. Northwesterlies for St. Matthew, St. Paul, St. George, all looking about 4 to 5 foot seas on Saturday, with westerlies coming in on Sunday. As that system moves a little bit to the south, we adjust our winds to about 15 to 20 knots. 15 knots inside of Norton Sound with a 3 foot sea. Northwesterlies for St. Paul and St. George, and inside the Kuskokwim Delta with a 3 foot sea. There may be as much as 4 foot seas further southward on Sunday. And now for the North Slope. Look for a stronger westerly flow around the Beaufort, 20 to 25, maybe as much as 30 north of Kaktovik, with 7 to 8 foot seas across the region. The winds and the seas will be moving right along. Westerlies coming into the Chukchi, 15 to 20, with a 4 to 6 foot sea there, and 15 knots just south of the Bering Strait with a 4 foot sea on Saturday. You'll see just a little bit of a change on Sunday. Winds come down just a bit, 6 to 7 foot seas expected there on that 15 to 20 knot wind, and at times that may be from the north and west. Across the Chukchi, 15 to 20 knots. There a little bit more of a south and westerly flow coming into places like Point Hope and Kivalina with a 4 foot sea on a 20 knot wind. Recapping tonight's weather, smoke will be the main feature there for you folks on the western Kenai Peninsula and over south central. The glacial dam release from the Snow Glacier is ongoing. Flood advisories are posted along the riverway there and into the lakes. We'll keep an eye on that. Make sure you have a way to get weather alerts in case it comes up quickly and produces a flood warning. For southeast areas of light rain and drizzle, that will continue pretty much on and off throughout the weekend, and we're still watching for some light snow potential across high terrain in the eastern Brooks Range as another wave of weather moves in through tonight. By tomorrow, it looks to be warm enough for mainly rain and drizzle and low clouds. IFR conditions will linger across the north and the west at times. For the east, areas of light rain showers will continue. Smoke is still in the plan for the weekend for south central, and another push of cooler air starts to move its way from the north with showers across the high terrain tonight and through the weekend. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.